Bismillah. Hey, and welcome back to the iLife Academy Coaching Podcast. This is Abdul Shahid, and in this week's episode, we're in episode 11. We are talking about narcissistic personality challenges, and this is right now a topic that's pretty hot. Everyone's talking about it, and it's something that recently I had a conversation with another coach about this, and it actually got me thinking. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to share this message with you, coaches, therapists, you regular people who are actually either suffering from being in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic, or someone who is actually feeling as though they're the ones with the narcissistic challenge, right? Now, you might have noticed I didn't call it a personality disorder. And so I'll explain that in a little while, but I don't really want to go into what is commonly known within the mental health or the psychology community as personality disorders. Like, we can talk about that in another session. But what I want to talk to you about is the subject itself that's currently in discussion in the medical and mental health areas, whether the coaches or therapists or psychologists alike. They're dealing with this problem as though it is unresolvable, or something that takes a very lengthy process, and something which is very, very difficult to resolve. And sometimes that may be the case, but it really does depend on how you approach it. So inshallah, what I'm going to be doing is I want to talk about it from a different angle. So you yourself, you may have suffered, or you may be suffering right now from having these tendencies, right, to be narcissistic. And I'm going to talk about what do I mean by that exactly. Or you might be the one in the relationship. And the worst thing about this is it is a real lose-lose situation. For the one who has these challenges, is behaving in this way, and the one who is in the relationship, in the marriage with this type of person, both lose out, right? And this is not in any way a justification for those who behave in this manner. So what I want to make clear is that this type of behavior is unacceptable, but it is very real, right? It's unacceptable as in it is the undesirable behavior that many people have to go through their lives suffering. And some people, and I don't want to say it's gender specific, because it's actually not, but some, I work with clients who are in these types of relationships where the man is the problem, he's the one with the challenge, and he's creating this horrible environment. And at the same time, I work with clients who are in relationships, in marriages with women who are narcissistic, and it is just as equally challenging for the men as it is for the women, right? Now, this is why I say it's not really gender specific. Narcissism is a behavioral pattern. It's a behavioral pattern. It's the way that people behave. Right. So what is described as narcissism, and how would you even recognize it? That's the first question. So the narcissist, or the one who has the narcissist challenge, on the surface of it seems to have a high degree of confidence, a powerful character. They're often they have this sense of self-importance, and it's very it's always this person is always concerned with looking the best in front of others. And sometimes the person will try to create a degree of success in their lives. In fact, very often they're quite ambitious, and they're trying to create a degree of success in their lives, And when things don't go accordingly, they become very defensive, very angry, frustrated at themselves, at the world, and it can just spiral out of control. It can just completely spiral out of control. So the thing is, these are the sorts of symptoms. I mean, you get exaggerated. The person may have an exaggerated sense of what's actually happening in the world, like their own abilities and what they can do. On the other hand, it could be the opposite of that. They believe that they don't have any ability, and they feel like imprisoned in the world of their circumstances. Right? Now, so it could be either or, but it's generally pretty polarized. Right? Now, there's envy. There's always looking at other people, comparing themselves to other people. A preoccupation with success and power, and how to get success, and sometimes like, it's not sometimes, but very often, like there's a lack of empathy, right? They can't really understand what's going on with other people because they're very inward looking, right? These are some of the symptoms of a person suffering from this challenge. Right? And it's a behavioral challenge. It's very much a behavioral challenge. Now, this person describes themselves or likes to associate themselves with the right crowd or the in crowd. The kind of people that they want to be associated with are usually the kind of people they want to be, right? And that kind of reinforces their perception of how life should be, and the outer level of success that other people have is often the measure of success for them. And the problem is that very often these people, they suffer many failures, many setbacks, and as a result they have this low self-image. They have a lack of confidence, and they cover it over with this behavior of theirs. But behind closed doors, it's all there. And so this person is adamant not to be beaten by the system, and strives hard to create life the way that they want it, the way that he or she wants it, but often falls into low moods, right? Often falls into low moods, falls into depression, and suffers a high level of anxiety. And the interesting thing is, like, people who have this problem, they don't even realize that it's a level of anxiety that they're feeling, like an anxiety, a fear. They don't even recognize it. And this anxiety or emotional roller coaster of a journey usually manifests in frustration, anger, and sudden outbursts. And so these are the kind of symptoms that you may see in a person who's being described as narcissistic. Right? Now, I'm not into labels, and I don't want to say that, like, if you recall right at the beginning of this, I said, it's described, narcissism is described as a personality disorder. But what I'm saying to you is that, this is a label. I come from a background in Islam, of theology and Islamic psychology, and an Islamic psychology based on the Quran and the Sunnah, and not on traditional psychology. Albeit I'm trained in different modalities, but coming from the background of Islamic psychology, like, you're looking at it very differently, and the whole label thing, it doesn't help the situation, and I'll explain to you why. But look, the people that suffer from this, they, both the one who suffers from this behavioral pattern, and the one who is in a relationship, in the marriage with this person, they both suffer. And of course, like, that doesn't make it okay that the husband and wife who's on the receiving end of this is meant to stay in that situation. Not at all, right? Safety is safety is the number one thing here. So if someone's safety and well-being, their mental well-being is being threatened by this type of behavior, then of course, like, the right actions need to be taken, and obviously help needs to be sought out. So going back to this, that was kind of like my disclaimer, just in case you're getting angry about what I'm saying. But look, I want you to see this without emotions, because I want you to understand exactly what's going on here, right? When, for the person who has narcissistic tendencies, when things aren't going the way it was planned, how they planned it, life all of a sudden becomes tense, and that becomes tense, and that is one of the symptoms, right? And it doesn't just become tense for them, but it becomes tense for those around them. Like, you'll often find these people are, in leadership positions, right? They're in leadership positions, they're in positions of power, and it feels to them that life is just hanging together by a shoestring. Like, it may not seem like that to everyone else, but to those people who have these behavioral challenges, for them it's like life is all hanging together by a literal shoestring. One slight move, one mistake could bring everything tumbling down. So the person lives in a deep sense of fear that something will create all of the things that they don't want in their life. And essentially it's fear that creates all of the unsavory behaviors that we hate to see in ourselves, let alone in others. And one of the greatest challenges for a person living in constant fear of everything falling apart is the relationship challenges at home with the wife or the husband, with the children. You see, this behavior, as I said already, is not gender biased. Like, many husbands have this problem, right? They're on a power trip, as they would be described, but many wives are also in this category. They abuse their husbands, right? And so this is not gender biased. This is something that is a behavioral problem that both male and female have. And of course, like, we hear it a lot about how women have these problems more, right? And in my experience, what I found is that the men are too afraid to speak about it, because they feel as though they're not men enough when they let their wives treat them that way. And so, they go through years of abuse silently, right? And this, look, again, I want to reiterate, like, this is something that people are suffering, like husbands and wives. And so here's my stance, right? My experience in helping this type of people is with their behavior change is that they're going to have these tendencies, and my approach, obviously coming from an Islamic psychology approach, the basis for my entire thinking around this is based on the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Likulli da'in dawa," like, for every sickness there's a cure. For every sickness there is a cure. So this goes against the very idea that a disease cannot be cured, a sickness cannot be cured. And here's the thing: you and I, human beings, we endeavor to cure people of their illnesses, right? We endeavor to help them. However, the cure never comes from us. Like, we are the facilitators, creating the conditions for a possible cure. However, the actual cure comes from Ash-Shafi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who cures. Right? Once a person recognizes and submits to this fact that shifa is from Allah alone, that then it becomes very possible to cure all diseases. And so we can begin to search for a possible cure, because now we actually believe that there could possibly be a cure. So let's take a look at what the psychology or medical community are saying about the causes of this. So what is being said, like about the causes, what's being attributed, is that three things. Like, number one, they're saying that the causes are environmental. The causes are environmental, parents, the parent-child relationship, or the upbringing of a child, how the child is nurtured and molded. A child who has excessive attention, like is overly praised and given everything, or on the inverse, a child who is excessively criticized and is always mentally beaten down. And whichever of the two this is, that child is shaped by the behaviors of the parent, and that's what's that is what is actually, that's the assertion. And then this child grows up and reflects that nurturing. This may be, as I said, it may be praise, excessive praise, or excessive criticism. Now, the second thing that narcissism is accredited to is genetics. So they say that it's an inherited characteristic from the father or the grandfather or somewhere in the lineage there, right, or the mother, right? And to say that is to say it's in the blood. So there's nothing you can do about it, right? The third thing that they say is that this is biological, and here what is discussed, and this is really a discussion that's being had. Like, the discussion is about it being a biological deficiency or a chemical imbalance in the system that causes the behavior. But all in all, this cause is not conclusive by any means. And rather, what's happening here is that the researchers and the psychologists and the therapists, in the clinical practices, like, they're, through human endeavor, they are trying to get to the bottom of the problem. But the problems with saying it's is genetic is like saying that this is permanent. You can't cure it. You were born with it. It's in the genes, which means you're stuck with it. There's nothing that can be done. And also, the problem with saying it's biological or neurological, it is to say that is to see it in the same light. And that means that, again, it has to be cured through medicinal intervention. And we know that obviously with medicinal intervention there are side effects, and so it's like a coping strategy. Now, those are the three areas that they attribute this to. But here's what I like. Let me give you a different take on this. In the traditions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq." Innama bu'ithtu, indeed I have been sent, li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq. Like, indeed I have been sent to perfect the character. I've been sent to perfect the character. I mean, that's a piece of revelation, right? That's a piece of revelation informing us that the character is something which is not fixed, right? Because look, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that he has been sent to perfect the character. That means that this is something that can be changed, it can be improved, and it can be perfected to the best of our abilities. And look, there is no perfect, so we're not going to get into perfectionism here, but the act of continually growing to become the best versions of ourselves, that's very real. So growing out of, the environmental molding that we've undergone as children is very possible, right? So changing the unwanted behaviors to behaviors that, are praiseworthy, and, behaviors that are conducive to good relationships, to having good connections with people, and ultimately praiseworthy in the sight of Allah, that is very possible. Because look, the statement is that I have been sent to perfect the character. That means the character can change. So the good news is that there is no narcissist per se. There are only people who suffer from narcissistic behavioral patterns. These are behaviors very often born out of fear, anxiety, depression, self-loathing, and a feeling of being undervalued and unappreciated. Right? You see, the person who suffers from such symptoms, they will become defensive, controlling, on edge, feeling overwhelmed by the smallest remarks or criticisms. Because from this, from these statements, it's almost like whatever's being said, thrown towards them, they're taking it as a confirmation of all of those negative thoughts they have about themselves, the image that they actually hate about themselves. See, these people, they seem like self-assured, but they have very low self-esteem, and the sufferer of this type of behavioral challenge is in a constant flux of moods. 1 minute high, next minute low. 1 minute happy, next minute unhappy, next minute totally irrational and defensive. And then the behavior of attacking others comes from an attempt at preserving themselves by lowering and putting down others around them. It's all a complete attempt at self-preservation. And I just want to make it clear that this, again, is not to justify, destructive behavior that we see out from this type of person, right? The type of person who has these behavioral challenges it's not acceptable behavior, but this explains why it's going on. It's like self-preservation. They're trying to preserve themselves, and they get defensive, and they're on edge. They get angry, they get frustrated, and you see all the bad behavior come out. And so the basic premise of an Islamic psychology, the science of the nafs, is that, which is where I'm coming from, right? Which is what I teach, the science of the nafs, right? The basic premise is that your client does not have, or your husband or your wife does not have a personality disorder. They have a problem with their behavior. They have a problem with the way that they're seeing the world, and it, as much as it may be distorted, it distorts normal behavior. And as I said again, going back to what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاءٍ, like for every sickness, for every disease, there is a cure. So it's not something that cannot be fixed. And in my experience of working with such people who suffer from these types of behavioral challenges, as well as those who are on the receiving end of such behaviors, is that we can remedy the problem given the right conditions and the right time. And it doesn't take forever. You see, the Islamic psychology approach, the ilm al-nafs, the science of the nafs approach, is to challenge these types of misconceptions, and it's to challenge the behavior and resolve the behavior through taking the person back to a divinely guided understanding of life, right? Through divine guidance. And this deen is complete. This deen is complete. There is no deficiency. There is no challenge, physical or psychological or spiritual, that the deen does not cover. It has all the solutions within that revelation. So for those who don't know me, like for those of you who don't know me, like I train coaches, clinicians, therapists on how to practically apply the divinely guided science of the nafs, Islamic psychology, if you like. Like we go through like understanding all of these subjects through like Islamic psychology and metaphysics, right? A metaphysical and psychological approach to human behavioral management and change, because that's how you bring about real change. And so if you want to know more about this, like go check out ilifeacademy.org, ilifeacademy.org. You'll find lots of details there, or go to QuranicConnection.tv, and you will find lots of details there. There's lots of free content, and check it out. Sign up for the free courses, and take a journey with the Quran. So I'm going to leave you with that. As I said, this is a bit of a sensitive topic, and I just wanted to speak on it because I've had several coaches and therapists talk to me about this subject, and I just wanted to give you an Islamic take on this behavioral challenge, one that can be fixed, and there's a solution to every problem. We just need to find the solution. That's all. So I'm gonna leave you with that. Jazakumullah khair. Until the next segment.